So thank you very much for having me on this webinar. I hope mine didn't raise too much your expectations on the Nutri-Score when you talked about it. So I'm going to give you a little overview of how it works and what kind of work research has been done on the Nutri-Score and how it's implemented in France. So the Nutri-Score was initially proposed by a French independent research team in which I participated. It was based on literature at the time that in particular highlighted three criteria for effectiveness of a front-to-back label. First, that summary labels tended to be more effective than nutrient-based labels, and in particular for vulnerable populations for whom saturates or sugars don't mean much and require more likely an overall assessment of the nutritional quality of the food. The second criteria is that labels that can be affixed on all foods tend to be more effective than those that are affixed only a fraction of foods, in particular those healthier foods within a category. Because when it's only on a fraction of foods, it's more likely to be overlooked. This is more of the reason also why it's important to have it more mandatory than voluntary. And then the last element was that color-coded schemes appeared more effective than numerical information. And in particular, those that use what we call semantic colors, meaning green and red. Because first, from a biological point of view, they are the ones that are more readily seen by the human eye. And then because they're also directly interpretable, because we have lots of signals that say that green is a go signal and red is a stop signal. So this led to the development of a graded colored summary label. The first development looked like this. And after a reshape by the French Public Health Agency, it now looks like this. It provides an overall assessment of the food that ranges from A, dark green, to E, dark orange for foods for the lower nutritional quality. So it is based on a nutrient profiling system that was initially adapted from the UK ofcom score that is used for the regulation of advertising in the UK. So it takes into account both favorable and unfavorable elements within a food, and it takes into account 100 grams of the food. So it takes energy, sugars, saturated fat, and sodiums, provides an estimate of the content, and allocates points, 0 to 10 points for these unfavorable nutrients, and then balances it with favorable elements that are the percentage of fruit, vegetables, and nuts, the fibers and protein content of the food. The balance between the two leads to a final score that is -15 for the healthier foods and +40 for the less healthy foods. And this overall score provides then the allocation to the Nutri-Score. Specific adaptations were made to ensure a higher discriminating power to the Nutri-Score for specific food groups that were cheese, beverages, and fats and oils. So in order to have validation of the system, we did a lot of research, extended research on both the nutrient profiling system and the graphical design. These are the two theoretical frameworks that were followed, and for each of the points that are highlighted in this framework, we did a specific study to investigate that specific aspect of the framework. So it's kind of a lot of research, so I'm going only to highlight the most important parts of it. So first, the studies that were performed on application of the Nutri-Score to actual foods to see whether or not it behaves the way we would want it to. So it was tested in 4 databases, and what we can see here, you have the distribution of the score in different food categories. And what we can see is that the score actually provides a hierarchy between food groups that is maintained when we look in terms of public health, meaning that fruit and vegetable are consistently better graded than any sugary or salty snacks. The second element is that there's a very high variability in the distribution within food groups, which means that using the score, it's possible to actually highlight this variability and increase the discriminating power of the label in order to allow consumers to make meaningful substitutions within a food group. And actually, the thresholds for the different colors of the Nutri-Score was set in order to improve the discriminant power within a food category. Then the studies that were performed on attitudes and understanding were usually comparative studies of different labels. because literature suggests that any type of labeling actually improves the situation before any labeling is put into place. So in order to select the most efficient scheme, we thought that it was important to have comparative designs for attitudes, understanding, and any other scheme. So we compared the Nutri-Score with the percent GDAs, with the multiple traffic lights, with the tick systems that's kind of like the Nordic keyhole system. And what we showed was that the Nutri-Score was considered as easy to identify and easy to understand, while the GDAs were considered complex and too long to understand by consumers. When we looked at objective understanding, meaning asking people to actually rank foods with or without a label from a single category of foods, what we showed was that, consistent to literature, all labels improve understanding compared to a no labeling situation. However, the performance of the different systems actually varies, and the Nutri-Score is the most efficient scheme. And in particular, when we did some subgroup analysis, we showed that it was the most efficient in all subgroups of the population, and in particular in vulnerable population, when it can increase up to 20-fold the capacity of subjects to correctly identify the nutritional quality of a food. Then the studies that were performed, there was a series of studies were performed on the use in purchasing situation in order to see whether or not the Nutri-Score compared to other systems were actually effective in improving the nutritional quality of purchases in store. So multiple settings were tested, and I'm going to delve into the large-scale trial that took place in France. So it took place in 60 supermarkets around France. You can see here the location of the different systems. It was comparative and took into account the different designs that had been put forward by the industry or retailers at the time. So the Nutri-Score was tested, the Nutri-Repère, which is only a variation from the percent GDAs, the multiple traffic lights, and the Sens system that was developed by retailers. The results from this large-scale trial was that 3 schemes appeared to have a positive effect on the nutritional quality of purchases, but the Nutri-Score was the one that led to the highest improvement. And moreover, subgroup analysis was done in order to identify whether or not there was schemes that were more efficient in all subgroups. So the Nutri-Score, again, appeared as having a higher impact in lower income groups compared to the other system, and particularly in subjects buying less expensive foods, probably the subjects with lower incomes. And compared to other systems, the Nutri-Score led to no deterioration of the nutritional quality of the shopping cart in any of the subgroups, while for other types of schemes, there were some deterioration in some subgroups. So this led to the signature of the inter-ministerial order that was signed after notification to the EU in late 2017. It was signed by the Minister of Health, Agriculture, and the Secretary of Economy. And 12 months into implementation, more than 80 brands have pledged for the Nutri-Score, because in the EU regulation, you cannot have a mandatory scheme, it's only voluntary. So the conclusion is that the selection of the Nutri-Score was based on scientific study, and it's actually an example of how research can inform policy making, because research actually had a very high importance in the selection of the Nutri-Score in the end, compared to the alternative systems that had been put forward, in particular from industry or retailers. There was key support from consumer association and also by civil society. A petition circulated at some point in time that supported the Nutri-Score, and more than 200,000 participants actually signed that petition to support the implementation of the Nutri-Score. For now, more than 80 brands have pledged for the Nutri-Score. They correspond to roughly 20% of the market share. And major retailers have pledged for their own brand. So there are follow-up and monitoring structures that have been set up to ensure a scientific evaluation of the measure. And if you're interested in looking into a bit more on the scientific studies that have been performed on the Nutri-Score in France, there has been a review of the studies that were conducted and has been published last year in Public Health Panorama, and it's available for you to download. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer to them.